It's time again for the Urban Chicken Podcast. Hey, let's talk chicken. Welcome to episode 3 of the Urban Chicken Podcast, where all things chicken are discussed and considered. My name is Jennifer, and I am your host. On this week's episode, we are going to discuss a very important factor to consider when you are picking your spring chicks. Also, the age-old question of which came first, the chicken or the egg, has finally been answered. So listen to the end of today's show to discover which really did come first, chicken or egg. So it's been a pretty busy week here for me. The weather has finally turned nice, and I decided that it was the right time to buy 2 baby chicks to add to my backyard flock. I bought 1 cuckoo Moran and 1 well summer chick. I know, that makes 2 dark brown eggers. I have decided to name the well summer Beatrix, and I will call her BB Chicken. The Cuckoo Moran, I've named Coco. And yes, I am cuckoo for Coco the chicken. What can I say? They are so freaking cute. I love baby chicks. I don't know about you, but I simply never tire of holding and petting and squeezing and loving a baby chick. With these new chicks, I'm interested to see how my other hens take to them when I introduce these 2 new birds later this spring to the flock. I have never introduced a new bird to my flock before, and hopefully I will be able to add BB and Coco to the coop without any incident. I will keep you posted on how that goes. Let's turn now to this week's chicken news. This week, NPR published an article about backyard chickens with a rather sardonic title, that being, Backyard Chickens, Cute, Trendy Spreaders of Salmonella. The writer, Nancy Shute, notes in her article that the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, reports that it has linked 195 people in 27 different states having contracted cases of salmonella after coming in contact with live chickens, and most of those contacts being with chickens bought from one Ohio-based mail-order hatchery. Ms. Shute makes a valuable point in her article. All chickens, including backyard chickens, can give you salmonella if not properly maintained and handled. However, Schute's article seems to suggest that backyard chickens are a significant cause of salmonella outbreak in America, but the statistics simply do not support that suggestion. Writer Katie Valentine of thinkprogressive.org wrote a thoughtful response to Ms. Schute's NPR derisive article about the backyard chicken trend. Ms. Valentine in her response article noted that the Shute article failed to reveal that though some 195 Americans did fall sick with salmonella from being in contact with a live chicken, ostensibly chickens bought for a backyard chicken purpose, that it is actually commercial factory-farmed eggs and poultry which are the largest offender when it comes to salmonella outbreaks in this country. Ms. Valentine quotes that in 2010 alone, that there were over 1,900 people who contracted salmonella in an outbreak linked to a commercial Iowa egg farm that produces more than 2.3 million eggs a week. Moreover, Ms. Valentine also notes that 124 people just this last month were sickened with a salmonella outbreak linked to Foster Farms chickens. Ms. Valentine also notes in her response article that according to one study, cage-free poultry facilities were 40% less likely to harbor salmonella than their caged counterparts. And lastly, Ms. Valentine notes that in a different CDC study, that the agency estimates that there were more than 182,000 cases of egg-caused salmonella in the United States, including 70 deaths in 2000. And ostensibly, the majority of those would be linked to commercial eggs, not your backyard chickens. Yes, indeed, raising backyard chickens does require that the flock owner be mindful of sanitation and disease. However, all things in life come with a certain amount of risk. For example, owning a house cat can put its owner at risk of contracting a deadly disease known as toxoplasmosis. Toxoplasmosis, which humans contract from coming into contact with kitties' feces, can kill humans. Or if it doesn't kill you, it can also cause acute infection in pregnant women, which may result in mental retardation, blindness, or even epilepsy in their unborn children. Based on this possible danger of catching toxoplasmosis from cats, should we think twice about keeping a household cat? This is the same logic used by Ms. Shute in her NPR article. It is frustrating to have backyard chickens characterized as some sort of, unusual or unnecessary danger that trendy urbanites are putting themselves at risk with. Keeping backyard chickens is far less likely to be the root of illness or death to the average urban chicken owner than a myriad of other sources of trouble. Let's face it, the average backyard chicken keeper is a lot more likely to fall ill with salmonella from eating some sort of commercially produced food rather than eating his own chicken's eggs. And he's also a lot more likely to die from a slip and fall accident in his own home rather than the handful of hens he has in the yard. Keeping backyard chickens is not the extraordinarily dangerous endeavor that this NPR article would have you believe. Anywho, I encourage you to go to my website, and in today's episode show notes, there will be links to both the NPR article as well as the thinkprogressive.org response article. I strongly encourage you to read both articles and judge for yourself. Now let's turn to the main segment of today's show. The main segment of today's show is all about picking the proper spring chicks to add to your flock or to start your flock with. Springtime is for spring chicks, and that is when we decide which breeds of birds to bring into our flock. When thinking about getting spring chicks, naturally our focus is turned to which breeds to pick and what characteristics those breeds have. Some of the characteristics that are often considered when picking a new spring flock are maybe egg laying. Does this breed of bird lay a lot of eggs? Egg color. Will this bird lay me a very pretty egg? Friendliness. How well is this bird going to interact with humans or with children? Socialization. How well does this particular breed get along with other chickens or other breeds? And attractiveness. Let's face it, we all want pretty chickens in our backyard. While those are certainly very important characteristics to consider about any bird that you might be choosing to get and to raise, those are not the only characteristics to consider. Even though the spring equinox has passed and the weather has turned warm and the days are sunny, you should put a lot of thought into selecting a chicken breed which will be well suited for your climate come winter. In particular, if you live where the weather gets cold in the wintertime, then you really do need to pick spring chicks that will grow up to be winter-hardy birds. If you don't consider this factor, when you go about picking your springtime chicks, you may end up with a coop full of beautiful, fancy breed birds that will suffer each wintertime and require a lot more care and effort on your part. When considering winter hardiness, the biggest concern is susceptibility to frostbite. I assure you that a frostbitten bird is a very sad sight indeed. So, despite the warm weather, let's briefly discuss frostbite, which I know seems like an odd thing to do in springtime, but we need to know what we should be worried about. First, how cold is cold enough that you should be worried about frostbite? I don't have a particular temperature number that I can say, at this temperature, you must be worried. But as a general rule of thumb, if it can dip below freezing where you live, then you should be concerned. The problem of frostbite is an even larger concern for those living in regions where wintertime regularly sustains below freezing temperatures, or where it's very cold and very windy in wintertime, or where it's very cold and mucky and muddy in wintertime. If that sounds like wintertime where you live, then frostbite should be something that you keep in mind. What is frostbite? I think we all have a general understanding, but to be more technical about it, frostbite is a medical condition whereby the extremities on the victim freeze, literally. When a victim is cold and their core body temperature drops, the body actually acts to protect itself. And it does that by choosing what they call life over limb. Life over limb is a condition whereby the body will actually physically protect its vital organs at the expense of its limbs. And it does that by concentrating blood circulation and heat at the core of the body and cutting off blood circulation and thereby heat to the extremities. On a human, life over limb body response actually causes frostbite in fingers, toes, nose, and ears. On a chicken, the life over limb body response will cause frostbite in their combs, wattles, earlobes, and toes. Frostbite is not just an issue of comfort or aesthetics for your chicken. It is a condition that can permanently maim or kill your birds. There are 3 levels of frostbite. The first level is called frost nip, and frost nip is where there is a freezing of the top layer of skin. The second level of frostbite is called superficial frostbite. Superficial frostbite is a condition where more layers of the skin become frozen and hard. So it's not just the very top layers of skin, it's a deeper number of layers of skin that become frozen and hard. The third level of frostbite, which is the most serious, is called deep frostbite. Deep frostbite is a condition whereby there is a freezing of not only all the layers of the skin, but also a freezing of the muscles, tendons, blood vessels, and nerves. Depending on the severity of a chicken's frostbite, the lasting symptoms can range from heat and cold sensitivity to the discoloration, withering, and eventual death of that affected area. This death and loss of affected areas sometimes can require surgical removal of a dead comb, wattle, or toes. I know, that sounds pretty dire. Most chickens who get frostbite don't die. More commonly, they just lose the tips of their combs or parts of their wattles. Though the most common frostbite injuries usually do not kill the bird, they do result in unsightly injuries that one can reasonably assume are painful to the bird. So how can you know which birds are winter hardy and which are susceptible to frostbite? Well, let's talk about the characteristics that generally increase the risk of frostbite. The first and most common characteristic which can lead to frostbite injuries in a chicken are large combs and very large wattles. Chicken breeds such as Leghorns, Rhode Island Reds, Andalusians, Buttercups, Campines, Minorcas, and Spanish are breeds that have been identified as being breeds more susceptible to frostbite. The reason being is that these particular breeds are birds that tend to have a very large single comb. However, keep in mind that some breeds of chickens have different varieties with different combs within the breed. For example, Rhode Island Reds. The most common variety of the Rhode Island Red does have a large, beautiful single comb. However, you can get a variety of the Rhode Island Red that has a more compact rose comb. So you might want to choose a variety within a breed with a smaller, more compact comb. Smaller, compact combs are less likely to get frostbite. It is worth noting, though, that any variety of comb can get frostbite if it is cold enough and proper winterization of the living quarters was not done. Fancy feathered birds are also another type of chicken which may be more susceptible to the cold and thereby frostbite. There are a number of ways in which chickens with fancy feathers can lead to cold weather issues. First, there are the fluffy feathered birds. These are birds such as the silky, which is a variety of bird that remains downy even as an adult, or frizzles, which is a type of bird specifically bred for the characteristic of having crazy feathers that are all askew. In these two fluffy birds, that being the silky and the frizzles, their feathers do not work in the same manner as an average chicken. An average chicken warms themselves by puffing out their feathers and thereby trapping pockets of air between their feathers and their body, which acts as a natural insulation. The fluffy breeds, silkies and frizzles, do not have the ability to puff out their feathers and trap pockets of air between their body and feathers, and so they don't have the same natural ability to warm themselves. Keep in mind, then, that if you buy a frizzle or a silky, that these types of birds do not have the same ability to keep their own bodies warm. Another fancy feather breed to consider when thinking about cold weather issues are the crested chickens. Crested chicken breeds include the Polish crested, the Appenzellers, the Crevecoeurs, the Houdans, and the Sultans. These crested birds are birds that have an unusual large crown of feathers upon their head. The cold weather concern with these crested breeds is that their crests can get wet and freeze on the bird's head. Is this a reason not to get a crested bird? I'm not necessarily saying that. I'm saying that if you choose to get a crested bird, though, and you live in a cold climate, you do need to be mindful about where these birds can go during the daytime to stay out of wet and freezing conditions when it comes to their crested head feathers. Another fancy feathered bird concern are birds that have feather legs. Chicken breeds that have feather legs include silkies, cochins, faverolles, and duclays. Now, this might seem counterintuitive. One would think having leg feathers would keep their legs warm, and probably that is true. However, the cold weather concern for chickens who have leg feathers is that they are more likely to get snow and mud and muck stuck in their leg feathers, and that mud and muck in the wintertime can become frozen in their feathers and thereby make their legs and toes more susceptible to frostbite and cold. The last type of fancy feathered chickens who may pose cold weather concerns are those breeds that have unusually long tail feathers. These long tail feathered breeds include Japanese, Phoenix, and Yokohama. The cold weather concern for these long-tailed feather breeds are the same concerns for the leg-feathered breeds, and that concern being that snow and mud and muck may get stuck and frozen into the bird's long feathers and thereby cause the bird to get very cold and be weighted down. Lastly, when it comes to picking cold-hardy birds, there are just simply some breeds of chickens which are not cold-hardy. Those breeds of birds which just simply do not perform well in cold weather are as follows: the Sumatra, the Cubalaya, the Malay, the Asil, and also the modern English game bird. For a number of reasons, these are breeds of birds that just simply don't tend to do well in the cold. I think it is noteworthy that some of these breeds that just simply don't do well in the cold weather are breeds that originated in hot climates, as suggested by their names. We've heard about which chicken breeds and varieties tend to have problems in the cold weather, so let's hear about which breeds actually do well in cold weather. Here is a list of chickens which are generally considered to be cold-hardy. Brahma, Orpington, Plymouth Rock, Rhode Island Reds if you go with the rose comb, New Hampshire, Buckeye, Jersey Giants, Australorp, Araucana, Americana, Moran, Langshan, Delaware, Sussex, Welsummer, Chanticleer, I don't know. I'm not 100% sure how to say that bird's name right. Chanticleer, maybe. Chanticleer. Dominique, Dorking, Hamburg, Holland, Java, Rosecomb, and last but not least, the sex-link. This is not an exhaustive list, and certainly some of the breeds on this list may be more cold-hardy than others. So, what does all this mean to you as you settle on which breeds of chicks to buy this springtime? Please understand that I am not suggesting that you shouldn't buy a fancy feathered chicken or a leghorn, for example, if you live where it gets cold. What I am suggesting is that if you are going to buy a chicken breed which does not tend to be cold-hardy, that you need to do that in a mindful manner and to make sure that you are going to have the appropriate accommodations for those not cold-hardy birds when wintertime comes so that you can keep them safe and warm. I hope you find this information on cold-hardy breeds to be helpful as you go about selecting which chickens to put in your flock this year. But most of all, I hope that you just have a lot of fun as you select and get your spring chicks and add them to your family. That sound lets us know that it is time again for Sally Side Notes. The age-old question of which came first, the chicken or the egg, has actually been answered. No. For real, it's been answered. ASAP Science is a YouTube channel that invites ordinary people such as yourself and I to pose to them any sort of science question that we desire to have answered. They then answer those scientific questions in a drawn-out art response. Think chalkboard or dry whiteboard where they draw the answer and talk about it. As far as I can tell, the answers seem to be well-researched and very scientifically sound. Recently, the question of which came first, egg or chicken, was posed to ASAP Science, and they took on this quandary, providing a final answer. In the battle between chicken v. egg, which preceded the other? The winner is egg. To see how ASAP arrived at that answer, please visit my webpage and go to today's show notes for a link to their video answer, which will finally put to rest why egg is the winner. As a bonus in the Sally Side Notes segment today, I wanted to point out 2 videos that I am going to be linking to in today's show notes. These are humorous chicken videos. The first chicken humor video I'm linking to is a video from the Jimmy Fallon Show. In this video clip, Fallon and a couple other famous friends sing a spoof song chicken style for you. Additionally, in today's show notes, I'm also providing a link to a recent Jay Leno Easter prank video. I'm linking to this video for actually a couple reasons. First of all, it's hilarious. And second of all, it frightens me. I don't want to ruin the surprise of what's going to happen in the video, but it really did shock me how ordinary people apparently don't know much about baby chicks and that you can't freeze dry them. Or at least they haven't been engineered to do that yet. I hope that you will enjoy these bonus links to a couple of chicken humor related videos. Well, that's all there is for this week's episode of the Urban Chicken Podcast. Thank you for joining me and listening to today's show. Please be sure to go to my website located at www.urbanchickenpodcast.com. In today's episode show notes, you can find links to all of the articles and all the other resources mentioned in today's show. You will also be able to find pictures of my new chicks, Beatrix and Coco, in my show notes as well. Additionally, you can also reach me via email on the webpage. Please go there to pose any chicken questions, stories, or comments you might have. Please join me again next Wednesday when we will discuss and discover some new chicken topic together. Until then, me and the chickens here wish you a good week. See ya! Thanks for listening to the Urban Chicken Podcast at www.urbanchickenpodcast.com. The theme music used on the Urban Chicken Podcast is Jenny's Theme, written and performed by Jason Shaw. You can find this at freemusicarchive.org. See you next week.